Welcome. On behalf of the Institute of the Cuban Historic Memory Against Totalitarianism, I invite you to hear and watch a presentation about the alternative tourist guide prepared by our institution. Here is the Executive Director of the Institute, Carmen de Toro Gomez.
This is a tourist guide for a different Cuba. One of the consequences of the decisions made by the governments in Washington and Havana to reestablish relations will be an increase of American tourists to Cuba. There are many factors that will cause the increase of the flow of travelers, and that is not the theme of this work. Its purpose is to suggest, particularly to Americans traveling in the island, that during their stay there, they will take the time to visit places that will not be mentioned by their guides, but which they can access without breaking the law. In Havana, you can go to the Church of Nuestra Señora de la Caridad del Cobre, Our Lady of Charity. There, Arnaldo Socorro, a young Catholic, was murdered during a procession. Or visit the pier, from which the Spanish ship Covadonga sailed with hundreds of priests expelled by the revolutionary government. If you continue in the capital, you can walk down the Quinta Avenida, 5th Avenue, and recall Las Damas de Blanco, the ladies in white. These are women who, with flowers in their hands, are regularly assaulted and battered by mobs, manipulated by the regime. You can also travel the route followed by the casket in which the Castro regime symbolically buried the Diario de la Marina, the Marine Daily News, thus ending the freedom of the press as we know it. If you wish to continue traveling in history, in the district of Miramar, you can reach the apartment where Olga Digna Fernandez, wife of Marcial Arufe, who together were confronted and she was shot in the back by state security. They refused to give themselves up, and while trying to escape, they were murdered. Havana has other places of special importance. One example is in the Hospital Psiquiátrico de Mazorra, the wing Pedro Carlos Severa, where they applied the electroshocks to political prisoners, including women, all of which had no mental disturbances. You can travel to the village of Regla. Here you can see a boat in which, in 2003, 3 young men tried to leave Cuba by diverting it to the United States. They were shot by a firing squad within 48 hours, to serve as an example to others. In the capital, you have the Peru Embassy, probably the only diplomatic center to be filled by more than 10,000 persons whose only objective was to leave their country. These actions ended in the Mariel Exodus, a stampede of more than 125,000 men, women, and children who could not stand to continue living in Cuba. Also consider visiting the prison of Guanajay, used strictly to jail men and women whose activities were contrary to the government. These bars witnessed many women who spent more than 15 years in prison. Another notorious prison for women is Manto Negro. The walls here are saturated with the grief of hundreds of heroic Cuban women, same as the prisons of Guanabacoa, which no longer exist. In the jails for women, the Castro regime showed the cruelest side. We recommend you visit without warning in order for you to appreciate the sad reality of the women who were jailed there. In Pinar del Rio, there are places of interest. Sandino is a place to where thousands of small farmers and peasants were displaced by force. There they were forced to construct towns like López Peña and Briones Montalto and to live in them. These residents were prohibited from returning to the areas from where they were exiled. Another option would be to visit the places where the Soviet missiles were deployed with a nuclear capacity 100 times more powerful than the bombs dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The target were some of the most important cities in the United States. Matanzas has much history. A must-visit, you would say, is the mass grave in the San Jose de los Ramos Cemetery. The rest of the remains without identifying of more than 30 guerrilla fighters, some of them executed and others who died in combat. In this province, the Canima River crime took place. Some young men tried to hijack the tourist boat 20th anniversary, and to prevent its capture, the boat was rammed by a larger vessel, causing the death of 56 people. In Matanzas, next to Playa Girón, you could reach for the place where a semi-truck, truly sealed, was filled with prisoners of war. As a result of this barbaric action, 9 men lost their lives. Las Villas has numerous historical places. In La Ceiba, the dictatorship massacred 19 guerrillas who had been in prison for more than 2 years without ever having been tried. They used machine gun fire with equipment installed on a truck, Close by is La Campana, a chicken farm converted into a center where prisoners were shut in without the possibility of any hygiene, where they had to use the area they slept to do their necessities. If you care for military history, the cemetery of Maricaragua was the scene of a bloody battle against a totalitarian regime in which 11 guerrillas died, including the leader Porfirio Guillén. Or find transportation, which will take you to Monte de la 40 Caballeria, where in a battle that lasted several hours, Tomás Angil, head of the guerrillas in the Escambray, gave up his life together with 12 of his men. After traveling a couple of hours, you can visit Santa Clara and go to the old Abel Santa Maria Theater, a place where more than 100 people, mostly peasants, were tried. 5 were executed, never having been condemned. One of them was Porfirio Ramirez, president of the Federación Estudiantil Universitaria of that province. Life or death was sentenced by a powerful bailiff. Very close is the local cemetery. There lay the remains of Juan Wilfredo Soto in 2011, an activist beaten to death by the regime's police. In Camagüey, you can visit the places where campuses for the military units for production assistance were located. Thousands of dissidents, youths, were concentrated in merciless work camps. You can go up to the Camagüey prison, where Amnesty International Prisoners of Conscience, Orlando Zapata Tamayo, started and continued a hunger strike until his death. The old Cuban province of Oriento, eastern Cuba, is the reference point for the Castro regime's cruelty even before the triumph of the revolution. 12 days after the revolution's victory, Raúl Castro ordered the mass murder of 72 people. A trench was dug with a digger, and those executed fell directly into that common grave. In that region also died Osvaldo Payá Sardiñas and Harold Cepero. All of them are part of a long list of crimes by the dictatorship. You can also have the opportunity in this area of going to the prison of Boniato. In an area in the building, biological experiments were conducted in which doctors and security agents performed tests to find out the minimum amount of calories a human being could consume without it causing his death. If you want to see horror, you can go to Arroyo Blanco near Yaretas, Guantanamo. Prisoners were subject to severe questioning and hundreds were killed by firing squads. Upon your return to Western Cuba, you have the option of going to Isla de la Juventud, Isle of Youth. You can visit the ruins of the National Penitentiary for Men of Isle of Pines, a prison through which more than 15,000 political prisoners went through in less than 8 years, and where about 20 people were murdered in a compulsory work program where sadism of the regime's henchmen was manifested without limitations. An exemplary of the thousands of pounds of explosives were placed in the foundations of the building. On your return to Havana, visit La Cabaña and learn about the moats where hundreds of people were executed without due process of law, and where the shining star was the serial murderer Ernesto Guevara. A visit of great historic importance is the tomb of Pedro Luis Boitel, a student leader that died in a hunger strike, claiming his political prisoner's right. Or maybe you will choose to sail to the point where the Remolcador 13 de Marzo was sunk, causing the death of 41 people, including 10 children. As you can appreciate, there are many places of great interest you can visit. Without any doubt, we can assume that there are many more points of interest that others than the ones described here, even some of which maybe I'm not aware.